there is a very big chicken in a very small bird cage, and that is a deeply, deeply upsetting image. I remember me and my friend were stoned once, and we went, "What the fuck, dude?" Like, yeah, there's the skulls, but that is a big chicken. It's in a little bird cage. It's like, that's just not fucking healthy, man. That's really sick shit.
Motherfucking goddamn orange peel beef.
All right, everybody. Welcome back from the holiday break. This is One Fucking Hour, and I'm Evan Husney. Joined, of course, to my left by Tom Fitzgerald. Tom.
Hi, everybody. Happy 2020. What is it? 2022? There's a 2 in there and a 0.
And to my right, of course, Mr. Marcus Herring. Marcus, how you doing? How was your holidays?
Oh, it was just great. Feels good to be back here watching these movies, though.
Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah.
Got all that holiday BS over with.
Yeah, totally.
We got to be where we got to be here.
Yeah, Tom and I had a good time in New York, man. Bought a fat stack of 45s and slowed them down, man. We were listening to music at 33.
Don't make me too jelly now. Oh, you slowed down.
We are 33 guys in a 45 world.
Yes, we are
covered.
Yeah, that might be for a new podcast coming soon, everybody. But anyway,
hint.
Okay. Well, welcome back, everybody. And this fucking hour, we are talking about Tobe Hooper's masterpiece, amazing, one-of-a-kind film, Texas Chainsaw Massacre from 1974. And let's start that clock.
God.
This is going to be tough. Now,
I know I've said this.
Tom get a whole hour or
Hold on. Before I hit start, okay, we have the spray bottle for Tom. So, Tom, down boy.
Yes.
Okay, this might be utilized in the show, but here we go. Let's do it.
This is like Dr. Evil's mini-me, behavioral control.
Okay.
Right?
Yes.
So, when I see the bottle, I'll shut up. I promise.
The subtext is Tom is so loves this movie so much that he's going to find it hard to contain himself. So,
yeah,
absolutely. And right on that, this is going to be dangerous, but let's start with Tom. Okay, Tom, you texted us earlier today, in fact, proclaiming that Texas Chainsaw Massacre, you know what, guys? It's my favorite movie of all time. So I wanted to kick it off to you, Tom. Tell us a little bit about why that is. And what your relationship is with this, fucking incredible film.
Yeah. Well, okay. Maybe we'll all get into our own origin stories. Very briefly for me, I was maybe like 12 or something. And my uncle and some other male family members said, let's have a guy video night. And I was like, huh? Okay. So we ordered pizza and we got like a stack of VHS tapes. And so this was way out in the country in the middle of nowhere, like with a pond and then like woods. And so we watched Chainsaw and I was like, whoa, okay. And then they went to go get the pizza and beer or something. And I stupidly stayed at this country house and I was all alone for like 40 minutes. And I was just staring out the window in the darkness. And it was simply stated, it's the last time and the last film that scared me, actually. I was actually scared, because otherwise... Yeah. After that moment, and for the rest of my life, it's like I've never been scared at all, ever. So like it had a huge impact on me. So that was a weird way to get into it. But as far as favorite movie of all time, I've said that for years now, and I really mean it. And it's not even really the horror aspects or the groundbreaking slasher thing and all that jazz. It's the power of the filmmaking, and we will get extensively into the filmmaking. So that's like one of the big points that we're going to be bringing up. But if I can bore everyone for just a second, one of the things that Chainsaw does for me is I'm calling it the serif and sans-serif horror situation. And what I mean is like fonts is what I'm referring to. And Marcus is an expert. Maybe he can help me. Serif are. I was going to say serif are the in this bad analogy are traditional horror films. Hammer. and even like Night of the Living Dead, you know. So in the font world, Marcus.
Well, what I'm thinking is like, on the cover of Time magazine, right? That's a font that has the little extra doodads added to the letters. So you got your T, and it's got the let's see, I'm trying to find the camera here. And the lines go down at the end of the T, and at the bottom base they go out. So the serifs are the little lines they've added to fonts, and the sans serif would be fonts without those, like the Helvetica and stuff you see at the airport or on stop signs. That's the sort of stripped down version.
Exactly. Thank you. And maybe you can start seeing my analogy here forming. So I'll do very briefly. This is why I think this is a very special film in general and special to me. I think it's like the first 70s film. Forget, first 70s horror film. So what I'm getting at is it's all very alienating, and there's nothing to grab onto with familiarity with Chainsaw. The music is not orchestral. It's like non-Western. It's music concrete. It's ugly, brutal noise. Okay, and it's disconcerting. And the filmmaking is ice cold and very clean, and it's very realistic. But it's a realistic world with these fantastical situations that makes it even more horrifying. You know, there's no supernatural elements or anything like that. There's also no police force. There's no detective. There's no love interest. I mean, you know, those couples are dating. It's not love interest. And everything is just to deliver a nightmare world, to deliver a place that it feels very real and lived in, but and relatable. Like you could be in that situation in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. There's no zombies. You know, that's all I'm trying to say. So I could get really long-winded with this, but there's a real demarcation for me, and that's why I'm saying it's the sans serif font of horror, the first and best example.
Down boy.
Down boy. Okay, so
Straight bottle.
And then Marcus, this is a very formative film for you, I understand as well. I would assume.
Yeah, it's weird. I saw it as a teen, but as a teenager, like probably 13 or something. One of the first movies I saw on my own, picked on my own. But what I realized is that I lived it long before that, in a way. And let me explain. I think that Texas Chainsaw is almost like as totemic, iconic a movie or villain horror movie for me is like a Dracula or The Mummy or Ghosts. And the reason why is because when I think about when like 1984 or something like that, I was just a little kid, probably 10 years after this movie came out. My sister had like a Halloween party out at my grandparents' farm, and I grew up in Texas, so it's out in the Texas brush, and they did my family did little pranks to kind of scare her and her friends out. So one thing was my granddad was like dressed like a vampire, my grandmother was dressed like a ghost, and they did sort of little horror scenarios like that.
Amazing.
But the big sort of like set piece of the evening was they had a hayride, and the girls went off at dusk into riding the hayride, and my dad was wearing put on a really grotesque mask and had a chainsaw with the chain taken off of it, and he when they were off on the road, he fired up the chainsaw and chased them and jumped on the back of the wagon and swung the chainsaw over their heads and stuff. And I wanted to go, but my parents thought it was a bad idea, so they left me by the side of the road in a ditch at dusk, in the bushes, by myself on this farm road, and I was just listening. And every time the girl screamed, I was laughing. I remember laughing so hard my sides ached. And I'm thinking that now. I didn't realize it at the time, but it's probably one of the reasons why my taste is so weird now.
That moment,
that moment of just I'm 4 or 5 years old, just laughing at these girls being terrified by a Texas Chainsaw Man.
Thumbs up. Yeah, amazing. I mean, for me, I'm younger than y'all. I saw it on DVD, so whatever. But it had a huge impact on me. I mean, ever since I saw it, it was always just that first time Leatherface pops out, in that iconic scene and knocks dude on the head with a hammer. Seeing that in its rawest form, with just no music, very sparse and medium shot. it was just so nightmarish, but very realistic, and that is what stuck with me forever, and in a lot of ways. But
so we're in accord with that. Like it's a real, very real world that's where a nightmare is playing out, which is probably the most devastating kind of horror.
Yeah, in the daytime too, no less.
So
in the sunlight.
Yeah,
For a lot of it.
That is, right. And that there are a couple moments in this that are, I think, the scariest moments in horror movie. Like,
without a doubt,
I don't want to jump the gun, but when he slams that door, that is the scariest thing in my mind. Like, it's like nightmarish, make my heart jump, scares the shit out of me.
Yeah, and we were talking about it earlier, Marcus. There's no music. There's actually, I think, like no sound at all when you first see Leatherface when it pans up to his face. But the music drops hard with that ugly, insane music concrete right on the slamming of that huge metal door. And that's genius. That's genius.
Yeah.
Incredible.
Yeah. And it's also like the way
Powerful.
the horror is played the way the horror is sort of dealt with in this movie too is very non-traditional. Maybe this goes back to your serif argument. Is in traditional horror films there is like, the scream and the but this movie, when things happen, people are confused and scared, like bewildered, like they're half asleep. And I think that's another aspect to it that makes it very realistic.
It's all bewilderment. Yeah, because they're not just being like attacked. They're also having their first experience with that insane house. So they're like, I'm dying, and what is this fucking house?
Yeah, totally.
Like, what is this?
Yeah, and you fucking gotta love Toby Hooper, aka as we call him, Toby Hoopy.
Why do we call him Toby Hoopy, Evan?
Oh, it's just a very endearing Canadian filmmaker. Was like told me a story. Yeah, I got to sit down, with Toby Hoopy one day, and so I don't know, it just stuck. But anyway,
that's what we call him around these parts.
Yeah. So,
Toby
but
Hoopy.
I always loved how Toby Hoopy talked about in that scene when Leatherface comes cracking down with the hammer. It's like people don't really realize that brain shards would crack and fall in your brain, and that's what would cause you to tremor,
spasms. That's so sick, by the way.
I know, it's like down.
I
Toby.
think that's the first time that ever happened. It's much more common, obviously, as the years went on, but that might not have happened in film. And again, that's very realistic.
Like a bludgeoning, and then like the aftershock.
Just spasm.
His muscles and nerves are spasming. That's another very realistic detail. Like not like, oh, I have an axe in my head and I fall down. It's like this little episode that happens very commonly in a head trauma like that. It's so fucked up, man.
So let's
Awful.
let's take a step back and let's look into the opening of this incredible film, because I think really the first a couple minutes of the film are truly remarkable. So Tom, I know it's maybe we can thread up the that first shot we have of the corpse display, I think I call it. Yeah. Just to have his whole background.
Huerto County.
Right. Well,
how Crawl sets it up to be all kind of like this really happens too. Like the Crawl.
Yeah. It's just kind of a device. It's supposed to be Ed Gein, but
more on that later.
Yeah, not Ed Gein. So, I was going to say, now this is sort of us getting into the filmmaking thing. We're going to do probably 3 different kinds of chunks. And to talk about just the filmmaking, I've always been blown away by not just the shot or anything like that, but how the film unfolds and it opens, and you do get the crawl and the narration and everything like that. I kind of am starting more. My interest starts here with this zoom out of the grotesque displayed corpses. And the radio. So I'm just going to get into the components for a second, just to articulate what I love about it and how you get to the power of the opening. There's all these components that are building in the first few moments of the film to create a whole world that is doom and dread and Texas. Okay, and so the components are the grotesquely displayed corpse, which looks incredible. It's such an outstanding shot. It's like at dawn. There's, like I said, this slow zoom out, but then the radio. That's such a great touch, and that's such a. I'm going to say it. That's just serif moment. That's the first thing you really hear is like just dry, horrible AM radio news. Okay, so that's that, and then you get into horrifying music concrete with the radio still going. So it's like, and today 17 nuns were raped and murdered. You know, like it's all only bad news if you notice in the film on the radio. And but then also the insane, harsh, psychotic music of Creed starts going too, and they're both going. And guess what you cut to? Of course you cut to sunspots, because it's like this on a cosmic level. There's this huge negative charge of evil. And that's the next thing. And then
that's what those are underneath the titles. That's what we're looking at as sunspots.
I think so. They got access to like a local planetarium's footage or something. Yeah. Telescopic shots of the sun. But then you're still not let up, because we do finally sort of land on Earth again, and it's a dead armadillo upside down on the roadside, roadkill, and you're still right. You're still hearing the radio, and also there's this shot of the sun shining, but it's like really diffused, and it's just this like blood red kind of orange.
It's like a filter over it or something, right? Or,
huge, multiple filters, yeah. So I just am very impressed by that, and I felt that what it does is it establishes itself, you know, and says like, this is what this is going to be, and there's no escape and there's no hope, and it's just all going to be a powerful assault on your nervous system.
Yeah, and one thing I want to tag in there that I felt was relevant, because I knew you were going to talk about the opening and the sun specifically, and I thought you might like this detail, is that I did read that Toby was fixated on the idea of including the sun, really into this movie, because he akined it to, and this goes back to the serif thing, which is kind of wild now, is like how all other horror films more traditionally would use the moon, to sort of signify certain things.
Oh, that's awesome.
Right. So the inverse for Toby is he's thinking the sun, which is oppressive, and that this is causing a different kind of madness. The sun is making you crazy.
Well, if I can, just want to make one little observation about the sun specifically. We're in Texas, okay? Mm-hmm. And I've heard an anecdote. The guitarist from Buttle Surfers, right? People are like, why are you guys so really, really fucked up? Like, why are you like mentally ill? And he said, when you're in Texas, you live in Texas, right in the middle of the summer, you go insane from the heat. You are not well, and you just don't give a shit. And you just like do weird stuff and fucked up things and break stuff and like spill mustard on your head and stuff. So it's like, so that is a thing. And so the sun is like a Texas thing. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it totally makes sense,
And these are very Texas filmmakers. And I do think more on this later, because we'll get everything out, and then I'll get into my political satire connections to this movie. But this film is very Texas centric, obviously in the title, but I think it deals with a lot of what was going on in Texas at the time as well. And I think to include the sun is such a strong presence to make more than half the movie occur in the daytime, in the heat. I think is a very deliberate choice.
It starts and ends in the sun.
Right.
It's dawn in the ending.
Right.
Right. And the sun is shining. The sun's rising in the very last shot with the Leatherface dance. So I never thought of all that, but yeah.
Yeah. Shall we get into just a little bit about, so that after this amazing sort of opening to the film, it gets right into the characters with our protagonist picking up the hitchhiker, which is obviously a very iconic moment. But something I wanted to touch on. Do you mind if I cue it up real fast?
Yeah.
You singled out the scene here, Tom, of this wonderful wide shot. It's coming up.
Also, I love her saying, "He's weird looking." No. Yeah. This isn't this. So this is what I mean. Yeah. This kind of shot, and that great. Only Texas guys can look like that, honestly. And but that's such an incredible, powerful, cinematic, creative shot for what really should have just been a dirtbag movie. But look at the beauty of that. Side note, I also pulled it because those kinds of scenes always scared me, where let's say you are the camera and you're like many yards away from the road and the car going by, the van going by, and also this psychotic person you're not right next to him, but he could run over to you. So it just has this what if you were stranded yourself for some reason on the side of the road, and you're seeing far away this very weird man. Maybe you're there when he just gets kicked out of the van. And so there's something brilliant in the filmmaking to play with your mind psychologically. Like, it's not a close-up shot, which I think is more, or this distant shot is actually more disconcerting for some reason to me. I can't really explain it. Do you guys know what I'm getting at?
Yeah. Well, I do think that the movie is trying to slowly walk you into a nightmare, a nightmare. And something very one fucking hour, which I know we love about these movies. I think Texas Chainsaw is the perfect cross-section of a lot of the movies we've loved that we talked about. Because... Yeah, absolutely. I mean, obviously, there's the Deliverance connection, which we chatted about a little bit. Sort of normies interacting with, hillbilly,
deep south.
Yeah, deep south. But also the connection to me is in Phantasm, which might not be so obvious right at the top. But what I do want to say is that something that both Kim Henkel, the writer, and Tobe Hooper both were jiving on when they were talking about Texas Chainsaw is the idea that this film exists in a nightmare syntax. Now, I know you love that shit. But basically, they talk about once the travelers enter the daymare of Texas Chainsaw, right? When they're crossing over into it, they're entering a nightmare loop. And of that, of course, got me thinking fucking Phantasm, fucking Tasm.
Right.
So I think that that's another cool cross-section,
That's just every movie we've done, I guess.
It does.
But the thing is, I know, we love our nightmares. But if I can actually geek out for a second, just to circle back to this, one of my many boring comments is that unlike Phantasm, hold on, give me 1 second. No spray bottle yet. This is a statement, and I'll get out right now. Chainsaw is always grounded in hardcore reality and never diverts. But something like Phantasm, which I dearly love, is fantastical, supernatural, other worlds, inexplicable things, fingers moving, But that's what I really love about this. That's the serifness for me of Chainsaw. It's somehow a nightmare that has absolutely got its 2 feet in the ground. That's all I want to say.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah, and one thing one observation that I also like, which is very of the time, in that scene when they're in the van picking up the hitchhiker, is when when the idea, and this is what I think is kind of segueing into the nightmare world, is when one of the characters is talking about Mercury being in retrograde, and that's so like astrology and the zodiac and the occult is so of
they're
that
hippies
time.
kind of,
Totally, yeah. But that sort of acknowledgement, at least to me, does kind of jive with the sun and the moon shit we were talking about earlier, and how we were comparing it to Deliverance. I'll save a lot of this for later, but we're just kind of on the subject. Is we were talking about the sort of with the connection with Deliverance of the new guard entering the old guard, like Deliverance. I think that is a huge theme of this movie. Is having the hippies kind of entering in, because a lot of comments are made in that opening. In particular about the industrialization of what's going on in Texas at the time. They're talking about slaughterhouses. Yeah, and they're talking about, a lot of these guys are losing work because of the technology progressing in the area. Yeah. And how the old guard is literally left behind in a lot of ways. And I think it's shown to the extreme, and this is very Tobe Hoopian, but it's like going to the extreme where they're literally having to be reduced to cannibals, and that's how they're sort of living off, the
right. Well, it's like they can't kill the cows anymore. It's like Grandpa hasn't lost the touch, and if he can't kill in a slaughterhouse, he's got to kill something because that's all Grandpa knows. That is there too at the end.
Yeah, totally. But Marcus, you were saying what? You were saying?
Oh, I was just making the connection. You're talking about being Jonathan Swift-ish, like Modest Proposal or something, where it's like, right. Well, if we can't kill the cows, then we'll just have to kill the people then, and yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's really interesting because Tom, you're talking about the radio broadcasts that are coming in right off the top. It's really one of the first things that really also reminiscent of another one fucking hour, Dawn of the Dead, a little bit, where it's really painting the portrait of this whole world going to shit,
going crazy
in a lot of ways. And Tobe Hooper talks a lot about. Sorry, that's how I'm going to call him. Toby.
That's the only. That's his name.
Tobe Hooper does refer to this movie, as an allegory of what's going on in the country at this time. You know, he does talk a lot about that, and he does talk about this time in America in the early '70s. You know, when America is in upheaval, it's in turmoil. You know, and we're coming out of Watergate, and all these things are sort of happening in the country. And I do think starting the film off that way, I think is something that because there's huge seismic shifts in culture, and I think whenever that happens, evil prevails and dark energy comes to life, man. And I think that's what really he was tapped into making this movie. But more on that later.
I was thinking.
No, it's funny that's just 1 second. It's just that's analogous to my dumb sans-serif thing, like because I've always felt that in the '70s. So many changes happened so fast to everyone, hippies and squares and everything, that it kind of was its own freak out. Let me put it this way. At the same theater that had The Sound of Music, they later, 10 years later, played Snuff, the film Snuff, you know? And I think that people were getting sort of psychic bends that they could not handle all the changes, and they're all bad changes, you know what I mean? Like just the Vietnam War alone. And then side note, I think there was a huge meat crisis. I mean, I wasn't conscious then, but like there was some meat problem in the early 70s, like a meat shortage, and then meat prices were incredibly expensive, you know? So
well, there was also a gas shortage, which was huge in that time period. And that actually figures its way into the film. That's how it becomes a plot element in the film. Yeah. So, you know, he really is tapped into this. I mean, fuck, I could go into it right now unless you want to hard turn somewhere else.
Well, I mean, let's follow through, you know.
Okay, let's do it. So, all right, this book I got to shout out because anybody who's interested in this shit should check it out. This is, get ready, Leatherface versus Tricky Dick. Okay,
Is it good?
It is good by Martin Harris. It's real heady shit, right? But it really is examining, and it also knows it's ridiculous, you know, and it's playing into that, you know, which I like.
Yeah.
But it is really digging into one of the more underappreciated elements of Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which, you know, Toby's always talked about, but it gets steamrolled over. All the DVD special features don't go into it because they only want to talk about the neckbeard shit, you know. But something that's really important to Toby is this Watergate connection to Texas Chainsaw, which is like, what? You know? But a huge source of inspiration for him was the political upheaval of what was happening in the country. You know, this idea that, like, you know, we can't trust what is sort of happening because of the crimes of Nixon and what effect that's having on the American public. And he sort of looked at transforming that story of political corruption into, you know, a literal horror show. And even Kim Henkel describes this as the blackest of comedies in terms of it being a commentary on the schizophrenia of the Watergate era, which I think is really interesting. And, you know, the film opens with the story you're about to see is true. That's a lie, you know, right off the bat, because, you know, which is something that Hooper put in to sort of be in response to being lied to about, you know, the government and everything that was going on. You know, and that was something that he did with that, which plays into your radio thing at the top. And of course, you know, everything that's going on, and the very first words that you hear from the radio are actually talking about getting ready for the indictments and a grand jury and all.
Oh, it does?
It does. It's the first thing you hear. Yeah. So
that's awesome. Okay.
All my point is that he's very tuned into the changing of the guard in the country, you know, and this idea that the Chainsaw family represents the old guard and our new hippies are the new guard, and he's poking fun at both of them and the capitalist ideology that's pushing everything in the country forward. And I do think about it like, you know, also the sort of hypocrisy of Nixon is upholding this image of the perfect family, but obviously, you know, he's a fucking crook. And I think the Chainsaw family is sort of a very super highly deranged satire of that. Almost like you could imagine like in a National Lampoon's magazine. Like
I was just going to say NL.
It's
like everything you're saying. And like the cover of that book, it's like a vintage Michael O'Donoghue, you know, National Lampoon. As the first thing I was thinking of, because that's what they trafficked in. That's how they did the 70s, is through black comedy.
Yeah, so you could see that, though, like the Chainsaw, here's the new American family, is Grandpa and Leatherface and, you know, all that shit. So, I don't know. I just thought that was cool. This book is awesome. It dives into all that. So, you know, whatever. It's great. Anyway, I'm going to spray this on myself now. Go ahead.
Great.
The bottle, yo. Okay, so, you know what? I'm just going to maybe go into this other topic that we've been playing around with. based on you mentioning Toby Hoopy so much, and sort of back to the raw filmmaking and the filming of this, insane motion picture. So people throw around the auteur theory a lot, and it's Hitchcock, and then John Carpenter, and their body of work, and what does it say, and like the consistency of their work. But this is going to sound like an insult, and I don't want it to be, but I've always wondered why Toby Hoopy never followed up Chainsaw. Frankly, I mean, Eaten Alive is interesting, and I like it, but it's not on par. And then everyone pretty much knows now that he didn't direct Poltergeist.
Right. It's
just that because of E.T., Spielberg couldn't take directing credit, for it. So, and then what else is there, And then I don't
Life
really...
Force.
What?
Life Force.
Life Force, yeah. So, yeah, that's true. But anyway, what I'm saying is, I feel that I know it sounds harsh. He's overcredited, I'd say. And I think this is another example, and we like this at One Fucking Hour, which is this is a great group effort. It's a group of the superheroes all get together. And what I mean by superheroes, we've said this other times with films that we love, that all these people brought their A game, and that and I'll credit Toby, I guess, for corralling all these amazing people, on every level. So, we're talking about, why don't we put it on? Here's a good example of people on all cylinders. It's the scene where the girl falls into the shrouded living room, and what you're experiencing here on the aesthetics is the powerful, insane music, concrete noise that we were talking about earlier, and then the set design by the mad genius Bob Burns, editing, the quick cutting of the montage editing of the contents of the room. And the one that always gets me, my favorite, is there is a very big chicken in a very small bird cage. And that is a deeply, deeply upsetting image. I remember me and my friend were stoned once, and we went, what the fuck, dude? Like, yeah, there's the skulls, but that is a big chicken. It's in a little bird cage. It's like, that's just not fucking healthy, man. That's really sick shit. But then, of course, there's all these grotesquely festooned, skulls and
Let's do it. Let's do it.
Like half a jaw. So, you got it. Okay.
Here we go. I just want you to set it up. This is my favorite moment.
It's incredible. And her look
unforgettable, unforgettable scene.
What's she looking at, guys?
The chicken and the big, large chicken in a small bird cage.
Right. She's like, I'm probably going to die, but I can't.
God, that zoom lens.
And we're her, the camera's her.
That's a lot of a lot of their when they get killed is because they're just curious about the house. The first guy looks like he's going to charge in to check out the taxidermy too. Everyone's kind of
I mean, they're all drawn there by what Evan was saying, which is the gas crisis and an empty gas can. But she's just kind of looking around. But then we're looking around, and what I'm saying is there's so much really cool editing and all this handheld camera work, and this feels very much like LSD trip freak out hippies, kind of like just zoning out on this really darkly charged, almost psychedelic is what I'm
It's all done so well because sometimes on a low budget,
right here, these shots
on a low budget movie, if you were to focus on this kind of thing, who, me or
no, that was
look at these shots.
No, go ahead, DeMarcus.
I was just thinking, if the production design wasn't this good, on a lot of low budget movies, you don't want the camera to sit on those design elements for so long because you start to see the edges of the production, and you see they didn't execute this so well. But then the production design of this movie is just incredible. It looks so good that they spend a good 30 seconds just exploring that room, which is not something you normally see.
Actually, a
great
lot more.
True.
Cut it down.
But great.
You can
point.
bask in it.
Great point, and I want to tag in there because Robert A. Burns is the art director of the film, and he's really one of the unsung fucking geniuses of this movie. And to make a movie like this, you need a dude who's just fucking down with dead shit, who's working with dead shit, and this dude did that. I mean, he was collecting roadkill, buying dead dogs and animals by the truckload. in order to
He wasn't
make
a production
this movie.
designer. He'd have been a hitchhiker
Yeah.
slicing
Yeah.
people up on the side of the road. I
Well,
guess.
the thing about him that's so fucking cool is in making all this shit is the way that he approached it. Okay, and I was watching an interview with him, and he was talking about how his approach was really to truly get inside the head of the characters, you know, and which not all art directors really do, or production designers. And it was not. It's like we have to be conscious to not make this look like what an art director would think, you know, Leatherface would look like, or this chair would look like, or these things would look like. You know, it has to get into the real motivation of that, which I think is really amazing. And he applied that across the whole board of the film. I mean, he was kind of, yeah, go ahead. And then I want to.
I was going to say it's done so poorly these days. Like, just for example, like I liked what was the Matthew McConaughey series? Like I like True Detective or something.
Yeah,
I liked that. But then the setups are always just way too elaborate with like deer antlers and stuff. It looked like a fucking production design. Do you know what I mean?
Exactly.
Like, way overdone. And this is just, you know, like, like perfect.
Yeah,
you know?
It's just right.
It's just right, but he also like is kind of governing Toby a little bit. Going back to your auteur theory, it's like that iconic scene where the girl gets hung on the hook, you know, and that whole thing. It's like Toby's idea was, well, you know, she'll be put on the hook, and the hook will go through her chest, and it'll be some effect. And Burns is like, no, because then if people see that, they're only going to think about the effect and how you did it. It'll be like an impressive effect, but it'll be 10 times fucking scarier if you can't compute how she's being hung on that hook. You know,
he's right. It's the second scariest image of all time in a movie is the girl getting put on the fucking meat hook. Yeah. God.
So, but shout out to Bob Burns here, guys. And I pulled this because I knew you'd love it. I knew you'd love it. Get a load of this guy.
My man.
I mean, this guy.
That's just him. That's just his house, right?
I know.
He's no longer. Probably is. He's no longer with us. Like he's long gone, right?
Yes, he is.
I'd love to almost hang out with him. He's.
Well,
you know what he is? He's a hippie freak.
Yeah,
basically.
Actually,
and that was his kink.
Shout out to my good friend Clark Collis at Entertainment Weekly. He was working on a documentary about Bob Burns for a while. I don't know where that's at, but he was working on that. But one more thing on Bob Burns before we get to the rest of the technical crew. I just got a couple other things. It's just about the mask, you know, because he obviously created the Leatherface masks too. And it's so cool to watch the interview with him, you know, talking about it, because he's like, you know, he's very Texan. He's like, I worked a long time experimenting with materials that would feel and look like human skin, you know, like that. But, you know, it's so amazing because he's going into the hyper details, and you need a fucking guy like this, man. He's going into, this is the thought process of designing the mask. And we'll show a clip of where you really get to see it. But he goes into the idea of like thinking, okay, well, I'm Leatherface, right? Okay, so I'm killing people and taking their faces, right? But how am I killing them? Well, I'm hammering them in the fucking face, and that's going to damage their face, right? So how is Leatherface going to repair the hammered face, you know? Well, he's going to repair the hammered face with like, you know, crude wiring, you know, and stuff. So that's how far fucking Homeboy is going on that thought process.
If I can, let's actually can you play the Leatherface close-up shot, because I wanted to actually pivot and talk about the late great Gunnar Hansen. You know, he's a big fan favorite, and he's another, you know, like if you had the baseball cards of Texas Chainsaw Massacre, that'd be a much sought after one. You know, like he is a superhero of this film, and so here you get to see.
Sad.
No, so there's well, what I'm saying, you know, like there's two incredible things happening here. There's the mask itself by the great work of, you know, Bob Burns, but also, you know, Gunner's acting because it might not be that apparent, but you know, there's a classic anecdote where he gets this job, and he was a teacher, and you know, I'd never done a film, and you know, Toby Hoopy hired him because he said you filled the frame of the door when you walked in.
Yeah,
like you're my guy. But the thing is, now another person hired who's just a big goon, like a stunt guy or something. He might have just been like, I don't give a shit. I show up and it's like, what do? I grab this, hit it, you know. But Gunner, on his own dime, he went to a school for, you know, disabled children, you know, kids with, you know, mental disabilities. and he observed closely because he said, well, that's what Leatherface is. He's a huge child with disabilities, so he observed their behavior and applied it to the film. And you see that in that great scene where what's happening is he's confused because there's so many strangers suddenly coming to the house, and he happens to be alone in the house, and he's like, are there more coming? What's going on? He was disoriented. So like a sort of a child who's not running on full capacity, he was panicking, but and more. And then, like Marcus pointed out, like there's sort of a giddiness too. Like it was all very exciting for a second for Leatherface at that moment, and he's kind of coming down. So he applied consideration and some acting chops, very demented, very unique acting chops, but acting chops nonetheless. And so you really have to respect him for doing a really good job, because he cared so much about what someone else would have just phoned it in, like a stunt, like I said, a stunt guy. You know what I mean?
So brilliant that they give Leatherface that moment of like sympathy too. You know, that you're almost kind of feel you get some understanding into his character right then, because it's like without them ever telling you any backstory, you kind of understand just like what's going on.
He's a huge child.
Yes, like you get that. I mean, then later on they say it, I guess, but or like they allude to it. But it is pretty interesting that they give him. He does this couple horrible, scary ass things right in a row, and then they have this whole moment where you're just kind of like almost sympathizing with him. It's very. Yeah, it's kind of mindfuckery, you know.
No, totally. Yeah, and also for Gunnar, like shout out to to him too, in terms of you are playing the part of a horror movie villain, but you're under a mask and you don't have any dialogue, and to really bring so much to that, to inhabit it that nobody has ever been able to.
It's like silent movie acting almost, or something.
Oh, it is 100%.
Well, can we just bullet? Oh, please.
One more thing, just to close the loop, because we're on the Leatherface thread and the Bob Burns, putting a bow on Bob Burns. I just thought, going back to what I was saying about making the mask, I just wanted to show, homeboy working on this stuff, because I mean, it's just amazing. And then you also get to see, it's done, whatever, like, like see that in your nightmares.
There are 3 Leatherface masks, right?
I think
like
so,
one of them's the girl. One of them's the dead girl.
Yeah, this one. Yeah.
Only 3 people are murdered in this film. Isn't that weird?
And he's kind of like, when he's dressed up like has Leatherface become like the mom of the family or something?
Yeah. Well, he puts on the girl he killed's face, from what I understand. So he becomes mom or daughter or something. But actually, let's get maybe into that sort of.
I just had a quick question. Sorry, is about the Ed Gein. I wonder if there were like old photos or anything of the Ed Gein crime scene.
There are.
An old book or something.
Oh yeah, there's
tons of photos. There's a lot of photos actually.
And there's footage.
Yeah.
He
killed the woman. Let's just really quickly. There's a famous photo. It's really, really horrible. He hung a woman upside down and they call it dressing. Like he dressed her exactly like a deer.
Right?
Yeah, and so that's that disconnection of like deers, human.
And the
whole the film.
The whole Ed Gein connection is loose in that. Again, it goes to our Psycho 98 episode, but the Ed Gein connection to Texas Chainsaw literally is something that I think Toby Hoopy had a connection to somebody in Wisconsin, a family member, and who taught him all about that story growing up, and that stuck with him when all the other elements where Toby was much more plugged into what was happening in the country, and I think just the Ed Gein thing was just the vehicle, to put in all of his ideas.
It was a local story. I mean, he's just kind of north of Texas, and got around really. Like there was family members probably, but distant family members scattered around the part of the country. But if I can, just to, we're running out of time. Just like to move forward a little bit, I wanted to get back to one of my tedious topics, which was the filmmaking bringing us to an otherworldly place, almost a cosmic level of horror, even beyond the sun. And what I mean by that is, if you could thread up Sally Freakout, and this is at the dinner table, and this is also a shout out to the photography in the filmmaking. So the talent of that part of the film is I think well exemplified in this moment, and I feel that the film gets almost LSD trip-ish and cosmic when Sally's being terrorized and they really start focusing on her eyes, and it just becomes like really like a trip scene, You
It
know,
is
so
sort of
let's
like a
check that out.
ritual, just like 10 minutes of screaming and giggling and
Oh, but I'm talking about the shots of her eyes specifically here.
Yeah.
You know, so
Wow.
this is a great. I've seen this on the big screen, and it's really heavy when all the eye stuff starts happening. The close-ups I'm referring to.
it
You know,
it
right
it
here.
struck me so different watching this like on HD versus like the VHS that I saw when I was a kid. You know,
Oh,
it
yeah.
feels so much. It's like night and day.
Yeah.
Like I remember this being
this
completely
stuff,
like black, like enshrouded in black in the VHS.
right. So this is the stuff I'm referring to. Like, what horror movie does that? You know?
Yeah.
Like, and actually, can we maybe just for a second talk about actually the film experience? It sounds like a lot of us have seen this VHS, DVD, or even like a modern HD thing. I did see it on a shitty 35 millimeter print, and it was great, and it was really loud, and it was beat up print. And I went with my girlfriend, and she kept sinking down into the seat because she didn't do horror films so much. This is like in the 90s, and she just got smaller. And I was like, "You're getting lower," and she's like, "I can't do this film much longer." And I remember that she was like, "That was a horrible experience." Like she is she's one of those people who would fully feel a moment like that, and she was getting assaulted by the film. She said, I mean, she had a good time, but she was getting totally assaulted. And I got to say, just one last thing, is right when the film ended in the theater, it was a huge thunderous applause, you know, and the guy behind me went, "Now that's a fucking horror movie." It was such a, it was, you know, honestly, it felt like a rock band had just finished playing. It was like a rock and roll experience, really loud, beat up, shitty print, and packed audience. It was one of the great moments I've had in film. I mean, I was even freaking out. It was that eyeball shot that I'll never forget, you know. But there's more because I'll just stay with the power of the filmmaking itself and the components, and then I'll shut up completely maybe for the rest of this thing. Is well, I'm just saying, Evan, maybe there's just a couple shots at the end when it's day and they're running out into the to the road. That's a really chaotic moment, you know, with the truck driver and everything. But there's one called Bloodface.
Yep.
It's very short, so forgive me, but there's just a little bit of a point there. Is there's this really punk rock editing style, you know? So just go ahead and play it. It's so brief. So yeah, he gets hit, and then Sally's reaction. It's that punch in zoom, you know?
Let's do it one more time. Yeah.
That is some fucking sans-serif shit, you know? Like that's a ruthless fucking cinema-terroristic tactic. Like I only see shit like that in experimental films, you know?
She doesn't look like sexy, covered in blood or anything either. You know, it looks just like horrifically,
horrible,
just like poured in blood. Yeah, it's like.
Should we
just to have,
the
just to
ending?
use the editing punch to articulate like the panic and mania. That's great. They are all on all cylinders. The editor, respect to him. So
Yeah.
I like how it kind of bucks against you know, just the convention that you don't want to show the monster too much either, because they show a lot of Leatherface, and you're just still like trying to like check him out, observe him. Like you want to watch, like check out what's going on behind the mask. You want to.
And exactly what you're saying. But there was a close up early in the film. We played that earlier. There's a big close up, and I think that maybe fucked everybody up really hard. That might have been one of the first big moments of the close up, because you're so right, Marcus. That's total sans-serif, where it's just like, here's him, linger on him, enjoy him, really get a good look at this guy. His teeth are fucked up. That's someone else's face that he's wearing. You know, like just
never
marinate
loses its power either. You're not, but at the end of the movie, you're not like
only worse. It's only worse. Yeah. That he did. So I'm pretty good.
You're talking about the last shot, right? I mean, which is like the last scene is, you know, one of the greatest shot.
Leatherface's dance. We have that. We could look at that.
I just love that. You know, I mean, a lot's been said about the ending. Obviously, it's just it's so. I mean, obviously iconic, but it is such an incredible fucking choice. Let's just sit that for a second. How amazing of a choice it is just to be like, go ahead.
It's total sans-serif because, like, just here's my favorite component of it. Although I love all of it, the way it just cuts off. It's like mid-sentence kind of. It's just like whirling, dancing. Cut.
I know.
And then again, complete silence for a moment. Black screen, black nothing, no sound. It's and what happens is, this is all genius, is the image is still in your eyes because you're looking at black after the shot of him, right? And you're also still hearing the chainsaw because you've just cut off all senses, which is a very sans-serif LSD early 70s like vibe that like the guy who did I Drink Your Blood would never even consider.
No,
that.
It's like that shit is even
Next
to
level.
past the last frame of the movie, they're still making those choices that are fucking
Exactly.
killer. But let's just look at it just because it's the best thing ever.
Totally. And there's that son again, guys, like we were saying.
Yeah.
And it's kind of a triumphant thing. I mean, he's probably going to get arrested because, Sally escaped. And my favorite dude in the movie, the Black Mariah truck driver, like they all survive. So he's probably going to like get shot by the cops in like 10 minutes.
Well, you'll have to watch the sequel to find out.
Well, one thing.
No.
But one thing that is interesting too, just to close the loop on the sun thing, is Ed Gein famously also is chronicled in Slayer's song about Ed Gein, is the idea of dancing in the moonlight. Because I think that's what Ed Gein did. Is he put on his mom's
dress, in his mother's dresses.
That's Manhunter too, right?
Yeah. Well. Yeah. Right. But it is that's what the deal was. A Dead Skin Mask by Slayer is "Dance at the Dead in My Dreams," under the moonlight, right? But the idea,
Texas Chainsaw Massacre by Ramones, first album,
right? But in this moment, he's inverting it to Texas and with the sun, doing that in the sun,
right?
So I think that's just really cool how they sort of.
That.
I love the idea of the sun in this.
I'm so glad you circled back to that because we were talking in the beginning how the sun is filtered, and while we were talking, I was thinking that the way that it's filtered is because it looks kind of like the moon for a second. They've got this like heavy green filter. So
Evan, you could pop it on real quick. It's the sunspot.
And they're
armadillo,
like drawing that direct connection between like the sun, the moon's up in the sky, the wolf is howling. Like it would be like in a Dracula movie or start that way. And this is like, the only way you could really see the sun that direct overhead.
It's coming right here. Yeah. It also feels like
connects
like
to the moon, I think.
I think it's right there. It is.
Clouds,
that's the sun.
Yeah, right.
That's the sun right there. It also feels like maybe there's acrid like barbecue smoke in the atmosphere.
The gas station barbecue thing checks out too, because that is a very common Texas thing. Growing up, there's always barbecue in the gas station.
I think really at the gas station.
Oh,
so that's like a
common. It's like a weird thing. Yeah, it's very common.
Well,
especially in the small towns.
Now as we're getting to the sub 10 minutes here, I want to just touch on, going back again to just all of the crew members thinking on all on a wavelength of really just pure inspiration and incredible ideas. It also was a fucking madhouse, on that set. A lot of people talk about certain things, but one detail that I think I was kind of like, huh? When I thought about, but it just goes to the extent of how tuned in these guys are into this Leatherface headspace, man. Is so there was this shipment of dead animals they got, to fuck with, for the movie. But they're expiring fast. Everyone talks about how hot it was and how smelly the set was and how horrible that was.
Well, the lights were also heating everything up.
The lights and
film lights.
I think Gunnar Hansen was reeking strong. It was all.
How about that? He only had one outfit the whole time. Like they didn't have a double of his fucking clothes. Holy shit, dude.
Yeah, I know. So anyway, everything's pretty raw and rugged on the set, and pretty realistic. So the animals started like really degrading when they were kind of holding on to them. So the makeup girl, Dorothy Pearl, she started. She bought a bunch of formaldehyde and started trying to embalm all of these, like DIY embalming all the dead animals that they picked up. And while she's doing it so fast that one of the syringes full of formaldehyde went into her leg, and she accidentally put some of it into herself. And they're like, all right, fuck this. This is all fucked up. Like, we don't need to do this anymore. Like, everybody slow down. Yeah. And so then they're like, well, what do we do with all these fucking animals, man? And I'm sure a lot of drugs are on this fucking set.
Well, they grew and sold pot at the house.
I love that. That's incredible. But they took just literally hundreds of pounds of dead animals. I'm not even kidding you. and they had to make them disappear, so they just burned them all, man. So they had like a big fire pit of just like burning dead animals on this fucking set, and that is,
of course they did.
I mean, you're really in that mindset, man, and I love that. Everyone's just like, this is what we.
Well, they went crazy.
They went crazy.
Oh, you know what? Gosh, there is a brief clip that I do want to show.
Go for it.
Because we're running out of time, and there's a bunch of shit I wanted to bring up, and I forgot one of them. It's the approaching the house.
Yeah.
Evan. Mm-hmm. And you can just play it. Yeah. So one thing I love about a good horror movie, and this has it, is you see they're walking. They're looking for a swimming hole. One of the couples from the van, and there's something they're doing very well in the film. Well, look at this. They're setting up the parameter where the house is. Yeah, and there's this incredible shot of it's like surrealism. A clock, a watch with a big fucking rusty nail through it, hanging on tree branches, and that just I think if you showed somebody that out of context, it would look like a Parajanov thing or something like that, or
totally
some Eastern European art film,
Yeah.
And this even too, like them walking in the lovely field. But what I really like about this is I like horror films before the shit goes down, before you see Leatherface, and how the filmmakers are building the dread. Like here you're seeing all these cars, barely being hidden. There's a generator. It's like these people, and we, the viewer, are doing the math and going, this is a place you run away from as fast as possible. Like these are huge red flags. And what they do is that great thing. You know what? Sorry, I'm also zoning in on that distance thing like they did where you saw the hitchhiker from very far away get into the van. What they're doing is, as they're walking towards the house, like the house is a distance away, but they're using probably a certain kind of lens, Marcus, where they're making like telephoto, they're making it closer than it seems or something, and they're showing the house for the first time, and the way the film is framing it and setting it up, that's not a normal house, and that's a house that's foreboding, and you don't want to go there, and you start getting the hint of the noisy generator, and it's all that. It's such subtle, great filmmaking before the shit hammer goes down, and it's the total nightmare. It's that dread. It's the ratcheting up of the dread. You know what I mean? And they do that so well, and that's my favorite part of a horror movie.
Yeah. The generator getting louder and louder as they approach the house, and
right.
And it's really pumping up the nightmare. Actually, the daymare vibes of actually looking at, like you were saying,
beautiful sunny day.
It is, and that's what's. I mean, literally, they are trying to put you into that daymare loop. I mean, how fucking.
And time has stopped because the family fucking stopped time by running a rusty nail through the fucking stopwatch. Incredible.
Definitely, I'm sold on Evan's the gas shortage thing being a part of in the mindset, because there's just too much. I've always wondered, like, why a chainsaw? It's a very scary idea, but how did they come up with it? It makes a lot of sense because the chainsaw is gas powered. The generator's gas powered.
He has some story. He has some story about as a kid seeing a bunch of chainsaws in like one of those stores or something, and it freaked him out. But also, like the other thing too that was very topical, which is a very Texan thing, is the idea of there was that crazy mid-'60s Texas Tower sniper,
Charles Whitman?
Yeah,
Charles
that
Whitman.
whole thing, which was a big upheaval into the
really
culture.
Freaked everybody out.
It freaked everybody out in the changing of the tides. I know that's also mentioned by Toby Hoopy in this book as a big cultural
if you think about it, like we're so desensitized now to mass shooters.
I know.
We have like terms for it, like active shooter, and like and it's like it's so it's so commonplace. It's really grotesque. Like that guy shot all those people in Las Vegas. Remember that?
That.
And so
on the UT campus, it's weird when you're walking around because you can see the tower, and like I'm
Right.
always like looking up, being like, is this an angle? Could I get hit from this angle? You're always kind of conscious of where that tower is.
you could pick off anybody you wanted in that whole parameter.
And I think that's just a
360.
That's a huge thing for this movie. I think it's lost now that we're almost 50 years later on Texas Chainsaw. But I think culturally, huge shifts were happening in that time period, and it's no accident in terms of how he doesn't want to make a psycho Ed Gein movie. There was much more going on in this film that, I'm definitely a subscriber to that.
Totally. One thing I think there's a lot of layers.
And I was just gonna say, and anyone who disputes that, who's saying, oh, I don't think that's in there, and Toby Hoopy and all that. You just look at Eggshells, man, his movie before this, and they're examining those themes. Or Kim Henkel, who co-wrote Last Night at the Alamo, terrific indie Texas film.
Hankel's kind of an intellectual, man. Like
Oh, they are.
none
yeah.
of that would surprise me.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
So like I was saying though, there's layers, and a lot of times I get this very visceral reaction of the cosmic nightmare thing. So and it usually clouds my other possible observations. So I'm glad that you're kind of helping me out, because I always just go immediately to like a one-way ticket, on PCP to the nightmare world, and it's like,
Well, there's that too.
There's nothing. Well, that's what I'm saying. Like, so there's layers, and you can appreciate all of them together at once, and you can feel them and not maybe cognitively understand that. Everything you're saying today.
So one of the things I'm picking up too is that even though it's so different, and and like you said, sans-serif compared to other horror movies, that there are some like connections to the classical horror traditions and stuff in it. Like we had the moon sun thing with the clouds at the very beginning, but there's also like there's the drunk guy who's like the seer. There's like classical elements. There's a drunk guy who's going like, he's like blind drunk, but he's like, I can see what's going on here. He's like the blind seer. And then like the hitchhiker guy is kind of like Renfield in Dracula, where there's like a really creepy kind of lunatic that you meet before you see the real monster. I think there is some conscious like connecting it to like horror tropes, the classical horror tropes.
I asked Toby Hooper myself. His favorite movie was Frankenstein.
There you go.
So you got to know serif to be sans-serif, kind of.
Yeah. Right. That's amazing.
And I'm sticking with this stupid metaphor.
Yeah, Tom. Real quick before we're out of time, because I know you probably wanted to get it in. It's another amazing nightmare quality to this movie. Nobody talks about it. Mm-hmm. It's the amazing discovery of the tooth that is handed off.
Tooth it up, bro.
Okay,
well, it's another shock. It's another shock edit, like the bloody face.
We only do movies with teeth shots.
Well, I love that. It's like Deliverance. Like Deliverance.
You know what I'm talking about, Marcus? This shot?
Yes.
No, it's so. I thought of Deliverance when I pulled this today. Yeah, we're like big tooth movie guys.
He's like, he's so sick. He hands it to his girlfriend as a joke.
I know. What a douche. He deserves to die.
Look
at that. I remember when I saw that. Like, I think even the first time I ever saw the film, I went like, they're doing some different shit here. Like that could have gone down so generically. Like just 99% of horror films would have gone, hey, duh. But like to have that genius experimental film concept to play that out, and it works beautifully. It's the right shot to do. It's the right edit to do.
Much like Deliverance, it's the perfect signifier of, okay, you're in a nightmare now, or a daymare in this case. And it's like, I think of Polanski's A Tenet too, when he finds the tooth in the wall. It's like, it really is that, like, we're in another fucking world here. We're finding
there's some Freudian thing with teeth.
Yeah.
There's a big Freudian thing with teeth. Impotence and whatnot.
Totally.
Where's the clock? I think we did it, gang.
I think it's 5 seconds. Fucking man, God, I could have done another hour on this. Easy.
Chainsaw,
easy.
Pretty good movie.
Pretty good. Yeah, but it's pretty good. So, well, thank you, everybody. That was one fucking hour on Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Toby Hoopies, wonderful film, and that was that was good. Coming after the holidays, fresh into Texas Chainsaw. After that licorice shite we watched late last year. But I had a blast.
You're humping for the new PTA movie.
Oh no, I know.
I'll have to watch it. We'll have to talk. You
gotta watch it. We gotta do it. Speaking, couple of things on the one fucking hour news docket before we close down the show tonight. One is, let's talk about next week's episode. Very excited. We're going to be looking at a film. This is our first double dip, right? On a director on the show? I think so.
Yeah.
Think so. First double dip, sure. Same year, 1974. We're going to be looking at, you guessed it, John Borman's Zardoz. Next week. Zardoz. I'm excited, man. I haven't watched this in a while.
Me too. I haven't seen it in a long time.
It's fucking great. It is the future.
Wizard of Oz.
Gun is good.
Yeah, it's incredible. So that it feels just like a 70s comic book. It's incredible.
Yeah, and it's but it's like a head comic too. It's kind of It's kind of feels maybe like you get a hint of what Jodorowsky's Dune might have been like. A hint.
I know.
Like Mobius or something.
Jack Kirby. I'm thinking about Jack Kirby.
Heavy metal. And Jack Kirby, but also heavy metal. And I have a really boring theory too. So
Can't
Right
wait.
on.
We'll
Bring the
forward to
spray
that.
bottle.
Boy.
Get out the spray bottle.
The other thing, last thing on the last
Pablo.
news item. Last thing on the news item is in the coming weeks we'll be launching the 1 fucking hour Patreon. So anyone that wants to support the show, become a subscriber to 1 fucking hour. That's coming down the pike. And one thing we're going to be doing with that, the incentives for becoming a subscriber to 1 fucking hour, is we're going to be doing little overtime specials. So I'm sure there's a bunch of shit on Texas Chainsaw we didn't get here that we'll want to get later. But we're also going to be doing, guys, I hope you're up for it, feature-length audio commentaries. So you're only going to get those.
Gulp.
You're only going to get those on the Patreon. So we might be looking.
Use your Dogecoin.
Yeah, you're.
And we will not be bringing the spray bottle to those.
No, that's a spray bottle free zone. But we'll be
right.
looking at movies like Psycho 98, maybe. Maybe we could do a Texas Chainsaw audio commentary.
Possibly any film except Magnolia.
I'd do it, but
Right? Do we all agree on that one?
That would be horrible. That would be.
I
terrible.
can't do it again. I
I can't. No, it's over.
That's the last
May-
time I'm watching that.
Maybe,
Yeah, probably.
maybe,
My whole life.
maybe we could do PDL. Maybe we could get down with the PDL audio commentary. All right. Anyway,
Oh, fuck you. I know what
I just realized
PDL
what that
means.
was.
Oh,
all right.
I don't know about that.
Okay. Well, all right, everybody. Thanks again for tuning in this week on Texas Chainsaw. We will see you next week for Zardoz. And now, everybody, your moment of zen and good night.
I worked a long time doing experimentations of material to try to make something that might look like human skin.
Motherfucking goddamn orange peel beef.